And the last time we had a course that had a real microphone, I sang karaoke every time we came back from break. So just get excited you guys don't have breaks because I can't sing karaoke.
You're like a lounge singer.
I am. Yep, on my side hustle from Cincinnati Children's. So I'm Erin Iverson. I'm a PT down up at the Mason location. I've been there for about 14 years, all outpatient developmental, but my people are DCD. I love developmental coordination disorder. Patty and I will kind of tell you how we got into this in a second, but I treat everybody, but these are my people.
And I'm Patty Sharp. I'm an OT at Mason. I've been around a couple locations. Well, not really. I used to do outpatient neuro rehab at Drake when we had a unit there. And then I've been with you since, I don't know, a long time. I feel like since 2017-ish at Mason. Yeah, do you want me to tell how I got? Sure. Okay, so when we first, it was around that time, 2016-ish, that OTPT decided to start making these groups to work on different diagnoses, to get all the information around diagnoses so we could roll out best interventions and stuff. I signed up to be on the DCD team because at that time I was doing neuro rehab, and there was this intervention called co-op, which we'll talk about later, that was reportedly useful for brain injury. So that's the reason I signed up. And co-op is used with DCD. So that's the whole reason I signed up on the DCD team. And then they gave me Erin, and we did a little bit more on DCD. We're like, oh, sure, well, this is great. We can roll out interventions. And we found out that no one was being diagnosed with DCD. We can talk about our stats, but this is in 2016. We had no correct diagnoses of DCD at our hospital. Since then, I've moved more towards the developmental world, and Erin and I love DCD. We love teaching about it. We love treating the kids. We love the interventions that are for it. We just really enjoy this population and this work. So we're really excited to share with you a little bit more about it.
As disclaimers, we are therapists, so we have our OT and our PT minds, but we're really going to give you kind of a overview of what these kids look like, because it's not just a gross motor or a fine motor issue. Lots of our families, the biggest trigger I have from them is that, like, my kid is lazy, they don't listen, they don't get along with their siblings, we have a hard time with homework. So a lot of times they're coming in and I hear all these other like little triggers from the families. And it's actually that makes me think like we've got to figure out who these kids are and make sure that we're getting them the proper interventions so they can be a part of their family and not just be like this annoying person who's not listening at home. Okay? So we'll get to all the fun stuff. Where do I want to click? Right here. Alrighty. So our objectives are really just to give you a basic understanding of what co-op is, the different DSM-5 criteria to diagnose, and then explain our interdisciplinary approach and how you guys can help us find these kids, and how we can best support you to make sure that we're getting proper diagnoses for the proper kids. And then we'll tell you about some of our screens and assessments, as well as the interventions that we will be providing. So like Patty was saying, we initially kind of started with this DCD track team. So translating research and clinical knowledge. And, I was very excited because I knew about DCD. I had worked on the APTA clinical practice guideline and was kind of in the process of working on that when the team was started. So I had a lot of DCD knowledge. And then I had Patty, who has this insane ability to like roll things out, get things done. So we found out very initially like, oh crap, we thought we knew who these kids were going to be, and we were just going to start giving you the best interventions possible. And then we realized that we didn't technically have these kids on our caseload, even though we were totally seeing them. They just didn't have a formal diagnosis. So how I kind of got started with this, with DCD, is I was working with a patient who was absolutely precious and amazing and wonderful. He lived with his grandparents, so he didn't have a ton of opportunity for like general play. He was about 8, lived out in the country, didn't have neighbors. But he really was talking about how he didn't have a lot of friends to play with. And when he did, he couldn't keep up with them and they all wanted to do things and he was just terrible at them. So as a PT, I worked on balance and I worked on strength, and we worked on jumping jacks and coordination, and we improved all of these little tiny impairments. And then he still didn't get any better with playing, practicing, doing any of the things with his friends. So I found this huge place of Like, I've made improvements with you, you've made improvements, but we're not actually meeting any of your goals as a patient. So that's before I knew anything about DCD. A couple years later, I heard about this and I was like, oh, that was that kid. And I totally missed it. I missed an opportunity for the family to learn, to grow, and for him to really thrive at that age. So since then, I've taken these people and they are mine. So DCD are it's categorized by impairments in motor planning and motor coordination that impacts functional participation, and it's not explained by another neurological or medical condition. There's much more in depth with that diagnosis, but we really just want you to see and get an idea of what this kid looks like. You may have treated a kid like this before. You may have seen a kid like this on one of your kids' sports teams, or you might be able to think back to when you were in school. And this is often the kid who's like the last one picked for all of the sporting events, or if you're picking teams. So you might be able to kind of think of these people in your life.
It might be you.
Or it could be you.
Go for it. Another one. Nice try. All right. Oh, why don't you put that one down first? Yeah. Ready? Nice.
That was magic that he caught that. He wouldn't catch it again. So one of the big things Patty and I always say is if you just give a kid with DCD a tennis ball, you'll know he has DCD because they spend the whole time chasing the ball. They can't catch it.
Don't forget about those legs.
We'll do it dribbling.
There we go.
So he always kind of got the movements, but nothing's really coordinated. It's not fluid. One of his goals was to jump rope and the other one was to hula hoop. I was like, oh, great. Those are really not easy goals to work on in PT. But so this is him trying his jump rope ring. So what are some things that you guys kind of notice about his movements? They're perfect. Looks cute, yeah.
It seems like he has. There might.
Oh yeah, sorry. Mike, is it coming?
It seems like there's some difficulty with like body spatial awareness, like proprioception, like kind of like where to literally put some parts of his body in space and like how to like make his body move the way that he wants it to.
Exactly. These kids have a really hard time with motor planning. So just coming up with what you're supposed to do. So Patty and I always say, give a kid a tennis ball and you'll see if they have DCD. Also give them a desk and a chair and have them get up from a desk. Sorry, all you people online. Yeah, can you imitate? So lots of times our kids will tell them to like, okay, get up from the table. Doing it on rolliness. Okay, this is dangerous.
So, you guys would like get up, right?
Push yourself back and stand up.
So our kids are always like, and they get out like that.
Mhm.
So, they really, and I don't know if you saw in him, but he just did the movement, right? Did he think? Oh, yeah, like, and I know it's kind of hard to tell, but like, he's just gonna like try, he's just gonna throw his body at it. Yeah, just gonna throw his body at it. Throw my body, I'm just gonna, okay, get up, all right, I'm not gonna like think through, oh, there's a desk, I need to go back, the chair moves back, any of that kind of stuff.
Or like, we don't necessarily think about it, but if we get into the situation where it's not moving, we stop, process, analyze, do something different, right? Without necessarily even thinking about it. These kids will not. These kids will keep hitting at it as hard as they can to try to get themselves out of it. Okay, so.
The masking of the clowning around.
Oh yeah. So for him, you can kind of see that he's just like, kind of this cute little kid. And a lot of times when these kids are younger, they are the cute little ones. Like, oh, he's so clumsy. Sometimes as they start to get older, they're kind of masking some of the challenges with using silliness or they'll kind of like, they know that their bodies are awkward. So they'll be even extra like, just kind of extra silly to mask what's going on. We'll get into a little bit more of behavior in a minute though. So there are 4 criteria that need to be met by a physician. But a lot of times PTs and OTs are ones that are kind of helping to gather this information. So the first one is impaired planning, learning, and execution of motor skills. So this is just that the kid needs to be able to do the things for their age appropriateness, right? If a kid has never had the opportunity to go out and try to ride a bike and they come in for therapy the first time and they say, oh, they can't ride a bike, not necessarily DCD, okay? Riding a bike is a big one though for our kids, and tying shoes are kind of these big things that we see as kids are progressing through their ages, that those milestones are really challenging for them. Handwriting, yes, as well. It impacts various areas of the child's life. So it's not just that the kid has two collegiate soccer playing parents and the kid can't play soccer, right? It's that the kid has difficulty with soccer, getting themselves dressed in the morning, participating in school, opening their locker, getting on the school bus. We're seeing deficits in multiple areas of their life. The onset is in the early developmental period. We'll talk about how often we do more of the diagnosing around the age of 5, but typically our families report that they see difficulties early on. Sometimes either these are kids who don't crawl, they might be late walkers. One of the kids I believe we have in some of our videos, I've seen him since he was like 18 months old because he wasn't yet walking. Then on and off over the years, we've been working on different skills. So just general balance when he was little, he would trip and fall a lot. Then we were working on jumping, kicking a ball. As we kept progressing, now he's like 14 and he comes every time he's going to play a sport. He's still involved with sports at this point. He comes right before the season. We practice some skills just to kind of keep him with the kids his age. But we often see early on, or our parents say early on, oh, they were always clumsy or we're always a little behind, but they were able to catch up. And then it's not explained by intellectual disability, visual disturbance, or other neurological diagnoses. So there's no other reason to explain the coordination deficits. If we have a kid who has cerebral palsy, we know that sometimes coordination difficulties come with that, right? So we're going to say the CP is the cause of the coordination difficulties, can't be DCD. If we have a child who has a lot of visual impairments and they can't catch a ball or they're having difficulty with handwriting, we're going to assume part of that's the visual impairment that's causing that difficulty rather than true coordination difficulties. And again, it has to be diagnosed by a physician, but a lot of times the physicians don't necessarily have the opportunity to see, like, is this truly behind what other kids their age are doing? Is this really impacting all different areas of their life? So as OTs and PTs, often we're the ones who are like, oh, you came in because you have flat feet, but actually you're tripping and falling all the time. You're behind on your motor skills. You have difficulty with handwriting. You have difficulty with this and this. And maybe I'm going to start to get a referral elsewhere for more assessments. So what does it feel like to have DCD? So, you know, when you go and you get your hair done professionally, I know some of you guys, right? You know how it feels when you go and get your hair done. It looks so good, right? You walk out of there and you are hot stuff because someone did it for you. You watched the entire time. You paid attention. I'm going to learn this time how to make my hair look as good as this lady did. And then you try it and this is what happened, right? You were there. You were watching. You tried to pay attention. You thought you had it. And then no, we don't. And it's, you know, we just don't have the same motor plan. We don't have the same understanding and knowledge of how it's supposed to come out and how it's supposed to be done. And so that's what happens with our kids. They might look like they're paying attention. They might be paying attention, but then when they're doing the motor skill, it just comes out kind of a mess. So what do these kids look like? These kids are often the ones that are clumsy. They're falling, tripping, dropping stuff. This little face right here is a big one that I see a lot with my kids. They'll fall and look at me like, where'd that come from? Or they look at me like it was my fault. I'm like, yeah, there was not even a step. What happened? So they're often the ones that are just kind of tripping and falling, spilling stuff at dinner. Often our families say that like they sit up at the table and they sit really far away because again, we talked about being able to figure out how to slide yourself in and out. The milk might be too close. They might not be using the utensils that they need to be using and they're just kind of a mess sometimes. Often they need more safety supports than others. This little one has lots of things that are there to keep her safe. But a lot of times our families are so used to them falling and hurting themselves that they try to be extra supportive or they need extra support for things that are not necessarily age appropriate. Sometimes our kids get really isolated. They're not really able to do all the things that other kids can do at recess. So sometimes they kind of self-select to not choose to do some of those things. I had a patient one time who told me that at recess, he likes to sit under the slide and sing. And I was like, all right, good acoustics under that slide, probably, right? Like, all right, we just have a musical kid. And I asked if that's what he wants to do, and he said, no, I'd rather be playing the game where the kid stands in the middle with the jump rope and spins in circles and everyone jumps over the jump rope. But when you get hit with the jump rope, you have to become the spinner. And he said, I'm always the spinner and I don't want to just be the spinner. So I just stay under the slide. So you better believe in therapy, we were practicing on jumping over the rope so he could go play and participate with kids and the things he wants to do. So sometimes these kids become a little isolated. As they start to get older, a lot of our kids have difficulty learning how to ride a bike. And so you might hear like, oh yeah, I just ride my scooter while all my other friends ride their bike. And if you ask them, do you want to ride a bike? Usually by that age, they're like, nope, no, bikes are dumb. I'd like my scooter. I'm much better at that because they're used to failing at this point, and bikes are big and scary. And I want to look cool with my friends. I don't want to fall off my bike. So a lot of times we're teasing out that kind of desire and goal for them as well. Sometimes our kids get a little angry. Sometimes they can get a little pissy and they don't want to do the things that we want them to do, right? So we have lots of different mechanisms to try to guard ourselves when things get tricky. So sometimes our kids become class clowns because they try to just be silly and bring the attention in a funny way. And the teacher's not going to call on me because I'm going to be silly. And so the teacher's just going to kind of avoid any of that. But sometimes I get really mad and I can get defensive and I don't have to go up to the board and do the thing you asked me to do. Because I'm going to get mad, I'm going to throw something, and now I get sent to the principal's office, and so I don't have to do it, okay? Sometimes these kids also, at the end of the day, it's just too much. I just can't do one more thing. And so they kind of have meltdowns at home, or can be the kids that parents say, like, they don't do what I tell them to. They just get combative, but often it's because they're so used to failing that they just try to find a way to not have to do the thing. And then this is what they often turn out to be if we don't get to intervene young enough. Video games are great, right? They're fine. They're not great all the time though. And sometimes our kids, instead of being able to go out and ride those bikes and play and do different things, they're just kind of huddled up in the dark playing by themselves. So some quick facts about DCD. Like we mentioned, it's an underdiagnosed disorder. So in the literature, it says that we're supposed to have about 5 to 6% of the population has DCD. Here at Children's, when we started our track team, we looked at all of the patients in OTPT with a DCD diagnosis. One was an infant, so not a correct diagnosis. Another one also had CP, so not a correct diagnosis. And the other one, we couldn't really tell on the chart if it looked like DCD. So maybe correct, but not likely. And this was out of thousands of kids. And so it's definitely not a diagnosed disorder in our population. I have a lot of physicians that when we first reach out, they're like, never heard of it. So it's often our job, especially mine and Patty's, to make sure that everyone knows about this, which is why we're here. So coordination difficulties impact more than just gross motor skills. As we mentioned, it's impacting those fine motor skills, self-help skills at home. We can have behavioral issues, lots of speech issues with these kids. So we'll go into that a little bit more, but it's not just this gross motor, oh, you can't play sports sort of thing. It does continue throughout the lifespan. So 50 to 70% of adolescents continue with those motor difficulties. But as we start to get older, we can kind of self-select out of the things that are tricky. Like if I'm not good at a sport with a ball and a bat, I'm not going to continue to play the sport with a ball and a bat as I get older, right? I'm just not going to choose those things. So a lot of times we have families that come in with kids with DCD, and then you see the parent smiling in the corner and you're like, what's going on? They're like, you're talking about me. But now, like, yes, I still drop things. I'm still uncoordinated, but I do IT and I don't necessarily have to have these big gross motor movements. I don't have to do a lot of handwriting, and I found the things that work for me. So even though we might not necessarily notice the impairments as much when they're older, it's still continuing throughout the lifespan. And one of the trickiest things for me as a PT was that there's ambiguous terminology. So dyspraxia is a big thing. Lots of people kind of talk about sensory processing, and these kids kind of overlap with that. So people often tease out the impairments that come with the dyspraxia from sensory processing as like the diagnosis, when really it's probably developmental coordination disorder that is kind of the underlying cause.
Okay, go back to this video. Let's
Oh,
get
yeah.
into this.
Oh, yep.
Come get up from the table. Good job.
And he actually did it very well compared to some of our kids. Some of our kids will like actually slide out underneath because they're like, nope, chair's not moving. I'm gonna go down and under. Alrighty, we already talked about this, but this is just kind of showing that over time, with more of the work that we've been doing with our track team, we went from like no diagnoses to definitely increasing those number of kids that we have in our OTPT pool, and how often we're treating them. These are all of the different terms that are in the literature describing basically the same people. And, you know, why does it necessarily matter as long as we're providing the right intervention? We don't know if we're providing the right intervention, because if somebody is coming in with just dyspraxia, they can be treated with sensory processing interventions. We found that sensory processing interventions do not work with these kids. So we need to make sure that we're really identifying what the disorder is and the diagnosis so that we can be providing best care for these patients. And so we are recommending developmental coordination disorder as what we're using. Yeah. Can you give her the microphone? Oh, you got one? Cool.
So Maria and I are from speech,
Mhm.
and we're familiar with apraxia speech, because I was just wondering if like DCD would be considered like an umbrella term, or if it's usually like one or the other, because the way that DCD is being described is literally
Apraxia of speech,
but
yes.
more speech.
It is exactly
So I
that.
thought it's considered like two separate.
Yeah, so I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. So apraxia of speech is, it is absolutely kids with DCD. And there's a big overlap between the two. You can have apraxia of speech and not have DCD. You can have DCD and not have apraxia of speech. Most of our kids do. A lot of our kids have a lot of difficulty with enunciating and just overall kind of forming the motor plans with their mouth as how it should look and how it should sound. And so a lot of our kids who have DCD also would qualify. But the big thing that I found, I just did a presentation for OTPT and speech therapists. I found when looking in the speech literature is that a lot of times our kids are going to speech and they're not necessarily having those gross motor or fine motor activities or impairments pulled out. Because the biggest thing at that moment for the family is that we just want them to talk. We need them to improve their speech. And there was actually better outcomes for the kids who were kind of found early to have motor problems as well. And those kids who did have motor problems had worse outcomes long-term unless everything was addressed. So there is a big overlap on these kids, and we have a very easy screening tool that we will share with you so that you can help us find these kids too.
Can I just add in?
Yeah.
Also, you know, it seems most people who work with DCD, like all the international specialists that we know who work with it, will say, yeah, it's the same thing. They can't figure out how to move their mouth muscles. The literature's not, I don't know, you know,
We
who
can't
is
be friends with literature.
right. They're like, well, on that term, like speech likes to keep it childhood apraxia of speech, and they want to keep it its very same, like just that. So there's not been a ton of literature saying, hey, yeah, it's the same thing. I think it is. I've used DCD approaches to co-treat with speech to work on some of the apraxia things, which has been effective. We've tried to kind of get ourselves to the speech department, and there's been like yeah, we're good. So yeah, like, so I wish there was more, because I do feel like it's the same thing. And I feel like speech apraxia could benefit from some of these explicit motor teaching approaches that are just not quite there. So good pickup, but yeah.
And if you want to be our connection into
Mhm.
speech, we will take one.
I'm trying.
Yep. So dyspraxia in general is kind of that uncoordination of movement, right? It's that the poor proprioception, not really knowing where their body is in space. But really what we want you guys to kind of think about that as is more of a symptom. So you can have like decreased balance, right? You can have decreased strength. You can have dyspraxia, and all of those things can come together to form a diagnosis. So you can have dyspraxia with CP and you can have dyspraxia with DCD, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what the cause is or how we're going to intervene with it. So dyspraxia is more of the symptom. If we look at some of the bigger organizations, even the dyspraxia organization in the US is still called dyspraxia, even though we're trying to get DCD as the term. Some of it's based on funding, but it's more of the symptom rather than the actual diagnosis. Okay, so if you have questions about that, let us know. So you are likely working with a kid with DCD, or have seen a kid with DCD, or have witnessed a kid with DCD somewhere in your world right now. Okay? Anybody feel like they're seeing this and they're like, oh, I can think of somebody? Yeah, right? Is it any of you guys? You don't have to tell me, it's okay. So Patty and I teach classes on DCD quite often and the interventions that we recommend. And Patty is often our guinea pig on the person who's going to learn the skills, because sometimes it just takes her a little bit longer to learn the thing. But she can now moonwalk and do the worm. So get excited for what happens after class today.
Learn anything you want to learn.
You can.
It's a little bit harder,
Yeah.
or maybe a lot, but you can do it.
So if we're kind of looking about who are these kids and where is this coming from? Often it's males with lower birth weight. Does not have to be, but often it is. Sometimes these kids are premature and may have had some steroid use around birth just because they are kind of our earlier kids. The tricky thing is that sometimes think, well, those kids sound like they have CP. And, you know, there was some thought about like, maybe this is just a very mild form of CP, but the brain structure itself is different. We're looking at MRIs. The MRIs, if you're looking at a kid with DCD, you're not seeing like an infarct or anything in that case. Often it's more the functional MRIs that we're seeing some differences. So it is not the same, but you know, it kind of sounds very similar if we're looking at who those kids are. So like I said, there are differences in brain structure and function. So there's over-recruitment of areas for motor tasks. So if you were watching our buddy when he was doing the throwing and doing the catching, there's a lot of like extra movement going on. A lot of times they do things with both sides. They have a hard time kind of dissociating the right and the left, doing different things. So there's over-recruitment for motor tasks, but there's underactivation in areas associated with motor learning. These kids are having a difficult time of coming up with the plan to do the thing. There's also inefficient motor neurons. So if we are having kids watch or try to mimic or do something that we're doing, these kids have difficulty looking at something and being able to mimic that. There are differences as well in the cortical thickness and white matter networks, as well as differences in the corpus callosum and functional connectivity from one side to the other. So there are differences in brain structure of these kids. And we have found from interventions that we can actually make changes in their brain activation with intervention as well. So it's not that they're stuck this way, we can make some improvements. So our kids with DCD appear to have significant difficulty creating internal or mental models and creating connecting past experience with their new learning. So if we, like when Patty came up here with the rolly chair, I said, oh, you're doing it with a rolly chair? That's scary, right? Because we know that rolly chairs are not for our kids because they're all over the place in a rolly chair. So I'm connecting past experience with what a rolly chair looks like and the difficulty of being able to push yourself up to get out. Our kids with DCD are not going to do that. Our kids with DCD are not going to go outside, recognize that it's snowy and icy outside, and change how they're walking. Our kids are going to go out there and they're going to sprint right on out and fall on their tush. Okay, so they have difficulty pulling in things from previously learned information and connecting it with new experiences. Sometimes this is even from last session. So we might work with a kid on doing something like shoe tying or riding a bike. We think they've got it. They look great. They go home and they can't replicate it. They come back the next session and it looks like they've never practiced this before. So even kind of connecting what they have done and they've come up with can be challenging for them. So this is one of our buddies. I hope it plays the right way because sometimes it flips. So these kids have difficulty with poor motor planning, executive functioning. So overall, just kind of coming up with plans and organization on how to do schoolwork, get stuff from here to there, make sure that we're organizing all of the steps properly for the shower, things like that. And they have difficulty trying different things or different techniques. Sometimes our kids will do the same thing over and over and over. And I'm like, it's not working. Let's try something different. And sometimes they have difficulty even coming up with something different, or they come up with like totally harebrained ideas where, oh, I'm going to run and jump to catch the ball. hey, try it, see what's gonna happen. Because we want them to be able to try the thing they come up with. Because they're not often coming up with things. So we want to give them some support, but we're not going to let them keep doing the thing we know is not going to work. And these kids often look to their caregiver for help or reassurance, or they're waiting for us to tell them when to start. So my buddy knew we were working on throwing. I wanted him to give a couple of demonstrations, like, hey, just throw the ball at the target. And he waited for me to say, go for it, throw it, you can do it. And these kids often are just waiting for somebody to initiate their movement because they don't know how to start what they're supposed to do or when they're supposed to start it.
I want you to go up the slide the way I showed you, using the rope. How can you get up the slide using the rope?
So Patty climbed up the slide using, the rope while standing up. You
Oh,
just
use the
saw how
rope.
to do
Remember how I
it.
showed you to hold on to the rope? Whoa! How did I show you?
I'm gonna do it the exact same way, right?
Oh! Uh-oh.
In defeat. Okay, so the end, it's hard to see his little face, but he's got this look like, failed again, right? And we often see that with our kids. So, like we said, kids with DCD have difficulties in multiple areas. So we see motor skill delays, difficulties with performing their ADLs, difficulty at school, a lot of social challenges with being able to keep up as they kind of get older. They're not the cool ones who are out there on the sports field, okay? Communication difficulties as far as apraxia of speech, and then poor fitness and obesity over time. Can you guys see where the kid with DCD is in this line? It's kind of hard to see in general. What do you guys think it is? The second one? You think the second one? What about this kid? Yeah, who's not even in line, right? He's like, nope, can't do it, I'm out. You guys are going to gym class is terrible, I'm not going with you. So as a PT and an OT, we're often looking at the ICF model to figure out where we're going to intervene with our kids. And our patients, when they come in, we're often noticing that they have difficulty with motor planning, timing. Those words are really little up there, so I don't know if they're really little for you, but my old lady eyes are not saying this. Sequencing, fluidity, control, visual perception. So those are all the little impairments that as therapists, we often tease out and we often assess and use beautiful standardized assessments to look at all of these things. But really, they're often coming in because they're having difficulty with their activities. So they can't get themselves dressed, difficulty with handwriting, having a hard time in gym class or in PE with kicking, catching, throwing, jumping, skipping. Stairs are tricky. Bus stairs are terrible, right? So those are really tricky to navigate. And then often we kind of tease out, how is this impacting their participation? Can they do sport? Are they interested in sports? Group projects, playground activities. And then we kind of can see like, oh, this kid's actually doing pretty well with their gross motor stuff because they're really interested in dance. Their whole family loves dance. So they go to dance class 3 or 4 times a week. So our gross motor looks pretty good, but our fine motor looks pretty terrible because it's not an interest or it's not something that they focus on. So all of our kids don't look exactly the same. We have to kind of see what the environment and everything looks like to go into it. But often we're kind of noticing that we've got difficulties in all different areas. This is a sheet that will be much easier when you guys look at your own PDF to kind of see. But this shows based on different ages, what are some of the main concerns. So when we're kind of 3 to 7, difficulty in fine and gross motor skills, difficulty like riding bikes, tricycles, catching and throwing, difficulty with jumping. As we start to get a little bit older, we have more of those self-care issues, right? So being able to dress yourself, doing any grooming, washing your hands. As we start to get even later in the academics, we have more difficulty with writing, completing written work, especially as they're getting older. We have a hard time reading what they're writing. And if you have terrible handwriting and it's super big, how are you going to get all of the information in your head into that teeny tiny box? Okay, so sometimes our kids don't look like they know as much because they can't physically get it out as easily. Like we mentioned, we can have some behavioral issues of either kids trying to act out or can be really withdrawn. A lot of our kids have a lot of anxiety when it comes to trying new skills or doing things at school or doing things in front of people they don't know. So sometimes our world as therapists is just to build rapport to make them feel comfortable enough to try something new and trying to build their success with activities. And then emotional. this is one of the biggest things I've noticed with working with our kids is sometimes, they come in, they're 8 and they're 9, and you say like, oh, what's tricky? And they're like, everything. I can't do it. I suck. I'm terrible. Do you want to try this? No. Do you know how to do it? No. Right. So we get these kids who are just kind of pissy about things. And then as soon as we start to recognize that like, oh, that worked and I could try it and I was able to come up with a solution, we see a total change in what the kid looks like and how they're presenting with us. You want to talk about your bike riding?
Yeah.
buddy?
So I saw a 14-year-old boy, one time he was referred for handwriting. And if you're an OT, like 14, we're not changing anything with your handwriting pretty much after like 6, but 14, yeah, no. He couldn't figure out B versus D. So he just wrote all B's, which decent strategy. And guess what school did? They were like, okay, like kept passing him along, right? So why change it? So he came in, telling them that, okay, we're probably not going to improve handwriting, but we can work on keyboarding. There's a couple other things we can work on. Trying to tease out what he wanted to do was impossible. Like he didn't want to do anything. I feel like when they're younger, they're that silly kid and they're goofy, and it kind of switches over into then I'm not going to do things, and it switches over to I don't want to. I'm fine. I don't want to ride a bike. Long, over a couple of sessions, kind of got out that he might possibly maybe want to try to think about riding a bike. His friends after school, they would ride bikes to each other's houses and he wouldn't go. He didn't want to go, he didn't care, but he kind of did. He brought in his bike one session. Within the same session, we went from not riding a bike to riding a bike. The interventions that we have, we can get directly there and we can show them that they're not dumb. They're not incapable. There's nothing wrong with them. They just need to, we need to help them figure out how to problem solve around it. So he was riding his bike, came back next session. It was a different kid, 100% different kid. He was this like sullen, not going to look at you, grumpy to be there. Next time he came in, he was looking at me. He was excited. And I get chills thinking of it every time. I don't know. I didn't follow this kid long term, but I feel like that could be a tipping point from like, I'm okay. I'm going to participate, as opposed to, I don't want to do anything. I'm going to stay in my basement. So like, I don't want to understate the importance of helping kids figure out that they can do things. I saw a kid recently, I'm seeing her for all this emotional stuff, found out she couldn't tie her shoes. She's like 9 or 10. But family's like, yeah, we've shown her lots of times. She doesn't listen. I'm like, well, let's see if we can do it. We did it in about 20 minutes and she was so excited. It's just that like I'm gifting her the knowledge that she's not an idiot. And coming from someone who's not good at sports and ball things, like I get it. Like I feel like, well, I'm just terrible at all this stuff. I'm defective. But really when I figured out, oh, I just need to learn it differently, I get all my power back. And if we can give kids these things when they're younger, the better, then they don't have this core belief that they can't do things. So it's awesome. It's a gift to be able to have this ability to treat these kids.
One of the kids that we were just talking about earlier, who I said I've treated forever and always, a lot of times our kids around like the age of 8, everybody who's doing sports, like they keep improving, they keep getting bigger, they're getting stronger, they're getting more balanced, they're getting more coordination, they're getting awesome and amazing. And a lot of times our kids at DCD are like, hey, I'm still here, I'm still hanging on, I still want to play, please let me play, please don't kick me the ball, but please let me play. And so there becomes kind of around 8 to 10, this big gap of like what kids maybe would have liked to do, but then realize that they're just not meant to be those kids. Where Colby, one of my buddies, he comes in before every sport. He plays basketball and soccer. And so he comes in a couple weeks beforehand. We're working on just drills. Hey, remember, we have to work on dribbling, throw-ins, big soccer shots. Like, what are all the little things we need to be working on? Then we're overlapping with some practices so we can see, okay, what are the things that are still tricky with the practice? What do we need to work on with a little bit more one-on-one? And then mom brings me videos of him playing soccer in a game. So then we get to look at what the game, and at first he was, the kid in the middle, like literally in the middle of the circle, in the middle of the field, and was standing there watching. And so we watched a video and I was like, hey buddy, like, what do you think you should be doing when you're playing soccer? And he was like, running after the ball. I was like, well, are you running? No. What do you think you should do? run. Okay, cool. Try it next game. So next game, he literally was the kid. You know, like he was running, he didn't really know where to run or what to do. So then we're working on problem solving. Where should you be running? What should you be looking at? Where are your friends going to be on the team? And I think I have his video in here. But it's like, it's a kid I've been able to keep, I say his family and I and himself have been able to keep him in sports much longer than I ever would have expected based on some of his early motor skills. And as you can tell, Patty and I really love this population. So, keep going. Just show you. Cool. All right. So we know that DCD looks like a motor problem, right? So we have these kids who are falling, tripping, can't ride their bikes, can't do the things that they need to be doing, difficulty with handwriting and all that good stuff. And it looks like a motor problem. But really what we found is it's actually a cognitive problem. They can't come up with a motor plan. They can't come up with solutions. They can't come up with strategies. They can't take that learning from previous experiences and translate it into a new learning experience for these motor outcomes. So it's actually a cognitive problem that we're addressing. And the interventions that we're working on, it's really one of the big one is called cognitive orientation to daily occupational performance. Long name, co-op. But it's actually we're not just practicing rote activities, but we're making them stop, think, process, come up with a plan. And that plan is what's going to help them learn how to do the thing, not me telling them how to do it in my cute little way of telling him how, right? So when we were talking about those difficulties in school, they have difficulties with handwriting and keyboarding. We recommend starting keyboarding young, okay? Handwriting is terrible. Handwriting does not get better. So keyboarding is key for these kids. Difficulty using scissors, folding paper, completing artwork. Especially, we hear a lot of people say they'll do it, but it doesn't look like mine, right? It doesn't look like the one that it's supposed to look like. So just being able to kind of mimic what other people are doing. Opening locker combinations, and opening lunch items. I am a PT. It is never my first thought of being like, oh, how can I get you to use your fingers to open something? But I had this kid who came in one time at 5 o'clock and he was hungry. And mom was like, sorry, we couldn't get him a snack and he doesn't eat his whole lunch. And I was like, oh, you know what? How come you don't eat your lunch? And he's like, I can't open it. The little Debbie's and the chips. Those are the things he can't open, and that's the best part, right? He's missing out on the best part of lunch because he just can't open it. So you better believe, all right, bring your snack next time. We're gonna open it up before we get started with our stuff. And it's all just a quick, easy motor planning. Where do you think you need to hold it? Where do you pull? He just had no idea how to do it. So we got him eating his little Debbie snacks, which probably really helps with that obesity. But not my problem today. So gross motor concerns. Difficulty keeping up with peers at recess or gym class, taking on and putting off their coat, shoes, gym clothes. If they have to actually change for gym, this is a big scary thing for them. They don't want to do it. Getting on and off the bus, if they can even figure out which bus is theirs, and getting that appropriate posture for circle time or seating. Families will often say they fall out of their chairs. They're leaning on the table. They're the kids who are just rolling around all over the place during circle time. We've kind of found that sometimes these kids don't even realize that they're not sitting still. And they don't recognize that they're supposed to be sitting still. So if we kind of come up with a motor plan of being able to sit in a comfy position, or being able to sit in a static position, then we see improvements without necessarily having to give them fidgets or special chairs or accommodations. One of my patients came in and she was in preschool and she was described to me by her parents as a party waiting to happen. She had a little case of ADHD and she's always like, let's go. Okay. I'm sitting here, I'm ready. When are you going to let me do the things? And so she was always a little wiggly. And circle time was not her jam because she did not realize that she was supposed to be sitting still. So during therapy, we got out a game, we sat down on the floor and I set a timer. And I said, okay, find a comfy spot for you to sit in. And she sat crisscross applesauce. We played our game. And as soon as she started to wiggle or move into a different position, I stopped the timer. So, okay, for 2 minutes and 12 seconds, you were able to sit like that. Find another comfy spot. So then she sat with one leg under, one leg kind of hiked up, and here's my hip. And so she sat like that. We timed her. Okay, you sat like that for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Now lay on your belly. Let me see how that one looks like. And so she laid on her belly for 5 seconds because laying on your belly and playing a game is not easy. So we realized that some Some positions are easy, some positions are harder. Her teacher was awesome. So we came up with an idea of, okay, these are your comfy spots. You get to pick 2 comfy spots. Sit in one, and then when your body starts to get tired or wiggly, pick the other one. And you just go back and forth between the 2. So her teacher, when they would come to circle time, would say, okay, get in your comfy spot. So she's already telling, like, just by a word change, she's already reminding her, oh, I got to sit in my comfy spot. And then as soon as she would start to wiggle, she would just kind of look at her and be like, comfy spot. And so she'd go back to one of those 2 positions. Okay, so sometimes it's not that they have poor core strength and they can't maintain their position or don't have good proprioception. They sometimes just don't know what they're supposed to be doing. For handwriting, the top one is a typical 1st grade student. And the bottom one is our buddy, Lucas, who likes his name so much, he wrote it twice. And everything that he's supposed to be writing, okay? He's written the exact same sentence as the one above it. Clearly, we're gonna have a lot of difficulty knowing what he's understanding. We're gonna look at that and assume he doesn't even know what the letters are, have some more difficulty with cognition versus really he just might have difficulty having the motor plan for each of the letters. So our kids often have a lower self-esteem, behavioral issues, anxiety and depression, and higher levels of frustration. Sometimes these kids are the ones who go, like, the smallest thing can set them off because that's just the last of the small things, right? This is the 100th small thing that's happened to them today. And so they can go from like 0 to 100, or they might not. They might be the kids who are like, oh, that's tricky, I'm out. What's outside, right? So sometimes our kids are kind of squirrely as far as what they're paying attention to. There's also a big overlap with ADHD, so there's that as well. Communication issues, as we talked about, apraxia of speech is a big thing as far as the verbal. And as far as they're written, you can see in that handwriting sample that they have difficulty expressing what they need to say in written communication forms as well. Sometimes our kids look like they don't understand what you're saying to them, and they will just stare at you and not know how to initiate the movement. But sometimes they don't, sometimes they don't know what you're asking. And sometimes they don't know how to do the thing you're telling them to do. So they're staring at you blankly because they don't know how to start it and they don't know how to plan it. And they're waiting for you to feel awkward enough to just do it for them. So as we mentioned, they're avoiding that physical activity. They can get a sedentary lifestyle, which then increases their risk for obesity and cardiovascular disease. And it just creates this beautiful little cycle, which can often keep going on into adulthood. So a lot of times, you know, in the PT world, I'm trying to help them find wellness activities that they can participate in young. Running, their form might not be pretty, but you don't have to have a ball. You don't have to have any other equipment. You can do it anywhere. And it's something that you can do for a lifelong skill. So often we're just trying to figure out things that they like to do and can do so that they don't end up getting into this cycle of health difficulties.
Any questions before I go on? No, you guys still with me? Okay. Okay, so diagnosing DCD. Erin talked about how a physician needs to give the diagnosis, but really it's going to be other people who are going to see this: parents, coaches, teachers, therapists. And I think learning about it can help you no matter where you are where you are in this chain of healthcare providers, picking up on some of the things that parents might say that might lead you to be like, oh, maybe DCD. So we've gone over the diagnostic criteria and we're going to go over how to meet those quickly. And most of this falls under our job as therapists. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but just want to let you know how this comes into play. So criterion A, you basically have to have crappy motor skills. You have to be worse at motor skills for your age as compared to same age peers as a normative population. We do have to take into account exposure. This rarely comes into play, but like if you've never seen a bike, we can't expect you to know how to ride it, right? The place where I do see this coming into play is like international adoption or people who've come from a really deprived or neglected environment. But rarely this comes into play. Most of us have been exposed to balls and bikes and pencils and things like that, okay? Okay. So there's lots of assessments that we do as OTs and PTs that can get this. This is our Brunix, our Peabody. We've got lots of little tests that can compare you to a normative population, and we can find out how much below a normal population you are. If we're looking for more than a standard deviation below the norm. And these are things like catching a ball, jumping on one foot, things like that. Now, I will say that it's important to get this information to find out, yes, their fine motor dexterity is worse, or their single leg stance balance is worse. But in general, we don't care about that. After we've got that information, we know, yes, as compared to a normative population, you are much worse at those motor skills. We are not going to treat those things out. I'm going to get into intervention a little bit more, but that's kind of an older school thinking, whereas if we like remediate all these impairments, if we help you with your balance and your body awareness and your timing and your sequencing, then you'll be able to do stuff. But really, we're going to treat it a complete different way. We're going to treat the things that they can't do. Okay? So those are the things that really matter. We need this information to support a diagnosis, but this is not something that we are going to intervene at. We also don't expect it to change. If you gave me a standardized motor assessment today involving balls and sorts of things like that, I would be terrible at it. And that's okay. I can do the things that I want to do, right? This is these kids, like I said, you can learn to do anything with the right intervention, but you're still probably going to suck at like these things that are, these rote motor skills that we test for. Criterion B, we need to know that this is impacting your life, and not just in sports or gross motor activities or in one area, not just in handwriting, really. We need to know that this is impacting various areas of your life. Like we said, getting dressed, doing your chores at home, your schoolwork, your ability to play the sports that matter to you. Now, this does change over time. When you're younger, we want to know, can you do all these, these things that you quote unquote should be doing, right? But if someone comes in and they're 15, 16, 17, what they should be doing changes quite a bit. I don't really care if you can jump rope when you're 16, right? Unless you need to jump rope to pass your class. Or if you want to jump rope, it's important to you, okay? So someone who's going to qualify for a diagnosis early on may not later on, because it's not as much of a problem, right? We just need to know that it's getting in the way of various areas of a child's life. This is met by interview. We can just ask, how are things at school? How do they do with their chores? There's also a couple tools that are really handy. We love the DCDQ. This is something that multiple professionals can use. We'd love it if speech would use it, if your primary care would use it, if, nurse practitioners, anybody who's, kind of that first line of defense. The DCDQ is a fantastic, super simple tool that can help you bring DCD into your mind as maybe that's what's going on. Okay, it's not going to diagnose it, but it leads you to think maybe, and let's assess further. I think I show it next page. The DCDQ is free online at dcdq.ca. You will download a PDF. It's like 7 pages. Really, the questionnaire itself is just 2 pages. We print it off front and back. It doesn't say on those 2 pages, it doesn't say developmental coordination disorder or anything. It just says coordination questionnaire. 15 questions. It's asking the parent questions about how a kid learns motor skills, how they do with ball sports, how they do with some fine motor skills. And it's really just trying to tease out, is this impacting various areas of their life? Might it be DCD? And it ends in either suspect for DCD or probably not DCD. In our department, we give this to anybody who struggles with any kind of motor skill. So when we, one of our first questions when you have an eval is, do you have any concerns for functional motor skills? Okay, and we've had to kind of steer that question a little bit because people think in their head sports, right? But really doing anything with your body. If you have trouble with it, then we want you to fill out this questionnaire. If it's positive, then we are going to take that further, do a standardized motor assessment, do some more questioning to find out if it might be DCD. But this just puts this in your mind that it might be DCD. So we'd love more people to use it. You don't have to be a therapist to use it or anything. We can, it's best if parents fill it out.
Clarify that as long as we don't have.
Yeah. So yes, yes. So, okay. So as long as you don't have another diagnosis that explains your motor skills, like if you already have cerebral palsy, we don't need this. If you have, like, if you are blind, we don't need this because that is explaining why your coordination difficulties are there. So if you've got a lot of other things going on, it wouldn't be this. This would be more for someone who's coming in with some of these complaints about motor skills.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not for everybody. We definitely don't give this to everybody. It's best if a parent fills it out, but you can also have it filled out by like a coach or a teacher or a therapist or someone who knows how this kid has learned over time and done in their skills. There are some other questionnaires that we've got available, but really just asking the family how that, had learning motor skills that impacted these things or using the DCDQ is what we recommend. Criterion C is that it's early onset, that this has happened, that they've always struggled to learn motor skills or to do coordinated motor skills. They start to show signs of DCD 3 to 5. And I think the more you know about DCD, the more you can see it earlier. Like we can see kids that are 3 and 4 be like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. We will not diagnose it until age 5 because we give toddlers that, that grace of time to catch up and learn things, okay? Because a lot of them do, most of them do. But by age 5, if you're still struggling, then we'll start to diagnose it. We do need to know that this has always been this way. If Johnny was like great at sports and he was learning how to write and he wakes up the next day and can't do any of those things, that's not DCD. Something else is going on, right? We just need to know that, yeah, they've always been this way. This has always been an issue, okay? That's the only thing we just need to know from family. Yeah, it's always been this way to meet criterion C.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Microphone.
Grace.
So I have a question about like diagnosing this. Is it mostly by itself or is it comorbid with a lot of different things like autism, ADHD,
Yeah,
learning disabilities?
yeah, it's often comorbid. I wonder if we have a slide in here. I think we do. Yeah, we'll get into that, but like so much, it's like with other things. It's, I would say it's rare that
I've
we,
never seen it just by itself.
I think I have, but not, yeah. Then I'm always like, yeah, you probably have ADHD too. Anyway, go on.
So it is comorbid, right?
Yeah.
Autism, they recommend OTPT probably as part of what you need to be doing anyway.
The whole
But
department.
so if he's recommending OTPT, right, just for that, do you then have to additionally diagnose DCD, or do these kids just end up in OTPT and get those services without the specification of being?
Excellent question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep, excellent question. Let me get to this next part and then I will address that. Perfect question. No. Okay, so we've got early onset and then criterion D is that nothing else is causing these. I think that's wrong on that side. That criterion D is that these coordination difficulties, the difficulty learning motor skills is not caused by anything else, okay? So this is where we're weeding out other things. We need to know that it's not because of Down syndrome or because of some degenerative disorder or from a brain infarct or cerebral palsy, brain injury, any of those things. Cognitive function and visual impairment are things on there too. Cognitive function, you don't have to have like good cognition. You can still have a learning disability, an intellectual impairment. You can have a mild to moderate intellectual impairment and still have DCD. But if your cognitive functioning is so impaired that you don't really know cause and effect, you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing, that's not DCD. You can't learn motor skills because your cognition is so impaired. Often pediatricians will say, like, do I need to do an IQ test? No. We just need to know, is your cognitive, like, can you learn-ish? Then you can have DCD. If not, then, then it's something else. Same with vision impairment. A lot of people have poor visual perceptual skills or wear glasses. Then you can still have DCD. It's really, if your vision is the reason that you can't move your body, then it's that, it's not DCD.
And some of these kids do have difficulty, like if you're watching them, their eyes might have a hard time tracking and focusing on what you're doing, but that's also a motor
Right, it's a
motor movement, right? So we know that if there's a ball coming, I'm going to be watching the ball and going to the different areas. These kids might not recognize that, like, oh, there's a ball that's being thrown around. I should be watching to see where it's going. So they might not necessarily know that they need to be tracking and to be following that too. So it's sometimes that can be hard to tease out. But really, if we can get them to focus when they know that they need to be focusing, then we can kind of say like, that's not the impairment that's causing the coordination difficulty.
I use the example of me learning tennis in my 40s as an example a lot. Like I got brave enough to just like, fine, I'm just going to learn it. But I had to teach the person who was teaching me. I had to basically like ask him a bazillion questions when we're trying to get the therapist or the coach to be the one guiding all that. But anyway, I asked him a bunch of questions. I had to ask, like, he's like, look at the ball. I'm like, I am looking at the ball. Also, I don't know what my body is doing. You have to tell me what it's doing. But I'm like, do you want me to look at the ball until it hits the racket? And he's like, yeah. Well, I didn't know that. So I mean, that's where it comes down to. Like, I don't know what is obvious, right? These kids don't know what you just are supposed to know. So just learning it is helpful. Some things that will exclude a diagnosis of DCD, anything genetic, any kind of, chromosome missing or anything, any name syndrome, cerebral palsy, anything degenerative, any specific musculoskeletal condition, physical would be some like really different physical impairment, like missing a limb, or blindness, and then a severe cognitive impairment or any kind of injury. DCD can be diagnosed along with autism, like you asked about. That is a change, but it's been that way for several years since the DSM-5. I think DSM-4 had them together. But if you're thinking of autism, a lot of kids with autism, they can like climb the wall, get up in the ceiling, unscrew the vent, get back down and, then watch TV and screw up your remote. Their motor skills are fine. They can figure things out, right? They may not be able to figure out what we want them to, but the issue isn't motor learning, okay? And then you've got your kids with autism who have terrible motor skills, but it's not part of the autism, right? So this is when we're diagnosing DCD. Okay, now whether to seek a diagnosis or not. So it's kind of subjective, but I think of it as if a kid is coming in and like, this is the problem, they don't have another diagnosis, or they've got other things like a learning disability or ADHD. I want the deficit highlighted. I want people to know the problem is they can't think about how to move their body. So I'm going to say, I really encourage you to get this diagnosis because we can know about your child. We can gather information about the population. Other people will learn about it. If someone is like through DDBP, they've got autism and ODD and ADHD and, a big salad bowl of other things, I will bring it up to the family and I will say, this is what it is. If we want to seek a diagnosis, we can. It's not going to add anything clinically, but we might have that information. And sometimes people will say, yeah, sure, let's add that on there. And sometimes they'll say no for whatever reason. I've had some families say, no, I don't want any, I don't know, whatever stigma that comes with it, which I always try to educate. Well, there's really none, but anyway, so you don't have to. I think it's good because you guys need to know, oh, that's DCD. School needs to know, oh, that's what it looks like. That's what's going on. So absolutely professionally, right. Yeah. Like how it gets relayed that they should get a diagnosis or not.
Yeah. The doctor.
Yeah.
Sorry, either through the doctor or to the parent in the
Mhm.
situation like. Yes, like what is this going to entail? But if it's just something that's going to maybe fine tune your OT
Yes.
experience, or
Yes.
work on this.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. You would have to probably do it pretty clear, like deliberate that way, to get parents on.
Yeah, and we do, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so we're having this conversation when we're treating them, and generally we're the ones that get a little bit more time with them. Right. And so they might, yeah. So to be honest, though, when we initially rolled this out, we gave doctors like this big packet of information about DCD, and we're like, okay, where's our referrals? And like, nothing. Okay. So, because it's a lot, right? So now what we've done, we've made a lot of educational materials. We're presenting frequently, and we have our form. So we teach our therapists, our giant group of therapists, to screen for it, then assess for it. Then we've got a letter format that says, this is why they meet this diagnosis. We recommend this diagnosis. If you agree, sign here. And then they send it back to referral management. And then there's the big pages of information if they want it or not. But we've really simplified it. So, I mean, from my understanding, you guys don't have as much time to go over this stuff. So we're happy to handle it. And that's why we say, can you please just give this diagnosis? This is what it is. So we're kind of doing it from the back door. We'd love it to be, more from the top door. And one of Erin's big goals is to get a DCD clinic or to get into DDBP a little bit more formally. We've got all these things that we would like to get there, but I agree with you. Having the diagnosis really helps everybody. Yep.
You're already referring.
Correct.
You're just like targeting.
Yep. And educating about it. And yep. All right. Okay, we only have 20 more minutes, so I'm going to whip through this a little bit. Comorbidity. This is important because you guys asked about it. Yes, it's comorbid with everything, which makes it really difficult on our end, on the parents' end. The more you deal with it, the more you can tease out what is what. It's tricky though. The literature is all over the place in terms of autism because it's newer that you could have both diagnoses. So who knows what the overlap is, 5 to 80% given the literature. ADHD, it's a good 50% of kids with DCD also have ADHD. That's one where it's, if you have no idea, if I'm trying to tell you to like tie your shoe and I'm explaining, grab the bunny and put it through the hole and all that, and you're like, no idea what I'm talking about, and you've done this for years, are you going to pay attention? No, you're going to check out because what you're saying is in Japanese. So then it looks like ADHD, right? When we're treating, we're kind of just treating what's going on. So we'll start to tease out, if I give you the correct motor plan, if I help you problem solve, your attention issues fade away. Okay, you probably don't have ADHD. Same thing on the other end. If I'm really getting you this good motor plan and I'm helping you learn, but you're still everywhere, you probably also have ADHD, okay? We've seen it go kind of both ways. We're treating the functional issue, so we start to see where the core issue is. It doesn't really matter on our end, what the diagnosis is, but we've also been around for a while. And, when you're newer, it's better to have that. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things going on that overlap. A lot of these kids have sensory processing symptoms, and I don't want to minimize that, but if we are trying to treat function, we're trying to get you to do the things that matter to you, treating sensory processing with sensory strategies is not going to improve your functional skills. So, and that's a big thing. Whereas I think, older schools of thinking were more, if you give them the right input in their body, then they will be able to learn to do things. And it just doesn't work that way for DCD. So again, more reason to get those diagnoses. But it is tricky. A lot of these things, DCD, sensory processing, ADHD, joint hypermobility, they all cause the same thing. This is, our job to kind of tease out where these symptoms are coming from. And we get that information by working with the kid and seeing what makes the most sense and then educating the family as we go. Okay. All right. So now what? And I'm going to whip through this because we've got a family coming on at 2:30 who's excellent. So what works for these kids? The thing that I love most about this population is I have tools to help you. Like I know it. I'm so confident that I can get you to do the things that you want to do. And that's so exciting in therapy because it's really hard to get kids to do, it's hard to find interventions that work. But I think Erin's the same way. I'm so confident that the interventions we have are effective and they're great. And it's exciting to be that one to bring it. So, we've talked about, I think older schools of thinking or whatever, is more like we are going to assess everything that's wrong with you. We're going to find all your impairments on these standardized assessments. Then I'm going to remediate those impairments. I'm going to work on your core strength. I'm going to work on your balance. I'm going to work on your body awareness, right? With all these things. And then magically, you'll be able to do everything you want to do. You'll be able to sit there and learn and motor plan. But we found that doesn't work. That bottom up approach does not work for DCD, but for a lot of other things as well. What works is what can't you do that's important in your life? Oh, you can't play basketball because that's important to you? Okay, well, let's work on basketball. Let's figure out what you're thinking, help you think better, and then you'll be able to do it. Okay? And that's what the literature shows works. That's what we see work, and it's super exciting. So when we're looking at that bottom-up approach, and we need it, we need to find weaknesses, we need to find impairments, we need to know these things. But if we stay there and focus on those things, we're really focusing on what's wrong with you and how can I fix all these things that are wrong with you. I'm going to remediate those impairments, and then I'm going to eventually figure out, oh, is that impacting your life at all? maybe not. When we're coming from a top-down approach, we're saying, what can't you do that's important to you? We're really looking at what's getting in the way. Okay, not what's wrong with you, but what's getting in the way. And it's a big difference in how we approach a patient, the respect kind of that we give them. And we can get more improvement in the things that matter to the kid. And luckily, this is what shows works. Like the effect size for top-down interventions, for activity-oriented interventions, working on the things that are hard is so much greater than working on those remediating impairments. Okay. So there is some evidence that shows if we work on improving body functions and structures, so if we work on your core strength and balance and all those things, that there will be some improvement. There definitely will be improvement in those impairments, but the transfer to getting better at doing the things that matter in your life is pretty limited. Co-op is the main intervention that we use, or one of the main interventions that we use to treat DCD. Everything we do for kids with DCD is pretty much top down. That means working on the things that are hard, working on the activity itself, explaining how to do it, helping problem solve around it, doing the thing. Co-op is a specific task-oriented approach. Stands for the Cognitive Orientation Daily Occupational Performance Approach. Big mouthful. It's always confusing. We wish we could change the name, but we can't. It's a fantastic intervention. 4 main goals of using co-op are skill acquisition, so doing the thing that matters to you. Strategy use, which is really kind of the therapist's main goals. I really want you to be able to figure out how to do other things. Okay. And then generalization to other settings. So not just in therapy, but at home and in gym and in school and all that. And then transfer to other tasks. So we worked on basketball, but now you know how to problem solve basketball. So you can take that and learn how to problem solve around brushing your teeth. And the literature shows that, and we see it. And that's amazing because that is rare in therapy. The main thing that co-op is working on is that thinking about what we're doing. So, Erin talked about before, the deficit in DCD is not the motor skill itself. It's not motor function, even though they come in with like a fine motor impairment or a gross motor impairment. It's not really, their muscles work fine. Their nerves work fine. The connection works fine. What doesn't work is like figuring out what to tell my body what to do. I don't know that I need to look at the ball until it actually hits the racket. I don't know that I need to put right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. I don't know that. I can't figure it out on my own. So co-op is targeting that ability to make that mental model, that problem solving, that figuring out that there is a problem, that coming up with a plan and executing it. The main strategy we use is goal, plan, do, check. I know you've seen that in other literature, and it's not unique to co-op, but using it for motor skills is. So helping the kid figure out what their goal is, and then most of the intervention is us talking them through creating their own plan. It's kind of nuanced, and it takes, we give it a 2-day workshop on how to do it, because we don't want to just tell the kid step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? Because that's what's been done their whole life. Families will say, yeah, I've shown them how to do it. I've told them how to do it. They know they know how to do this. We need the child or the person to come up with their own plan. And that comes from us guiding them to do that. And then doing the plan and seeing if it works and modifying it. Okay, little example. This is one of the first kids I did co-op with. And this is the co-op intervention. It's a lot of talking.
Okay.
Put the other string over.
Okay.
Grab the strings in the next.
So she's going over this plan that we created together.
Take the lace on top and loop and closer to the X.
Okay.
But the difference is the words are hers. He's the one who helped me.
Read the next one.
He's the one that said,
Under with my right hand.
Okay.
those are her words,
Take
not
it
mine.
forward out with my right hand.
Okay.
So I'm not telling her about bunnies or a cute story just because I came up with
What's
it.
different about
What's
yours
worked
and
for
mine?
other
Don't touch. I want you to just look at mine. What's different?
Yours is smaller.
Smaller loop, and what else? It has a what?
It's string down.
Yeah, kind of like, what does a dog have?
A tail.
Yeah, so it kind of has a tail.
It's a lot of questions, not me telling, but
Okay,
a lot
so
of
grab
asking.
one lace,
And the questions are leading to
And the
this
blue.
plan. What
Okay,
is her
with the
plan?
other hand, grab it, not in the middle, but on the
Blue.
blue spot.
Okay, this girl also has ADHD. She's not medicated.
Okay, hold tight. So what are we gonna call that hand?
Left.
Your left hand, but what? Now, hey, now watch as you wiggle and wiggle and wiggle. What happens?
Comes blue.
Yeah.
How's her attention? She's doing
Hold
great.
down. Hold down. Come on. Good. Good job. Look what you did. Look what you did. Oh my gosh.
You scared
did it.
You scared me. Oh.
Did I scare
Scary.
you? That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
And I can teach
Okay,
my
yep, it's
friends.
okay.
Okay, this is 1 week later. Now,
Okay,
I
ready?
know you don't, I
Go.
mean, shoe tying, I could work on it for an entire year and kind of get it.
And then the kids will
Put-
still wear Velcro.
One string down on the
Now
other
she's
side of
Reading the
her
plan
finger.
on her own, that's her plan.
Grab one lace in the middle.
Good.
Pinch
Oh,
it
yeah.
together.
Train the therapist.
make
I mean,
a
we're used to getting hands in there and doing all sorts of stuff that we're not.
And very close to the
Excellent.
See how proud she is? She keeps pointing out stuff.
pull down.
Excellent. You did it. Yay. Yay. That's awesome. No, you don't have to talk me through it. I just wanted to see what you
No,
did.
I just learned co-op, so this is a total experiment. I'm like, well, let's see what happened. Put the plan on side. Now what's she doing? You see her, she's talking to herself. She's going over the plan that she knows that she owns, that she created. She's having a little conversation with herself.
So good. Okay, now what?
Isn't it a good
That's right. Yep. Yep. Keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she wants all the validation, which I should be giving. Now, does she look coordinated? No, I mean, she's always gonna be kind, I mean, she's like everywhere, which is fine. We're not trying to make these kids coordinated. We're trying to get them to do the things that are important to them in their life. Now there she made an error. She picked up and fixed it because she knows how, she has the understanding of what to do. It's mind-blowing too.
Oh my gosh, Shreya, you tied it. Without the plan. You did it. How did you know how to do that? So good. Yay. That's so good.
Now can I get a prize?
Yes.
So it's great. You know, I mean, like I said, shoe tying is something that I worked on for 15 years. And it took me years and the kids kind of got it, but never did. 4 weeks to full shoe tying, which she could do and she maintained. I mean, that's everything to us, you know, and we can, you know, she's so proud. Erin does a gross motor summer camp, a sports oriented summer camp that's co-op based. And it is fantastic. Yeah, so this is just a little glimpse of pre and post with the.
I find my way through the darkness.
Okay.
I battle hard,
Can you take
that's
5
how
minutes?
I'm made. And I may not heal from all these bruises, but I'll be better off this way. So it rushes in If you wanna get if you wanna get stronger.
So good, right?
I've been on the brink of broken, stripped in my shadow on the floor, like the broken bones inside my body. Oh, I'll be stronger than before. You gotta take it day by day. Keep moving forward no matter what they say. And when the leaves try to steal your faith, keep pushing through 'em 'cause there ain't no other way. If you wanna get stronger, don't break, don't break, stronger, stronger. Don't break, don't break, stronger, stronger. Don't break, don't break, stronger, stronger. Gotta take it day by day. If you wanna get stronger, don't break, don't break, stronger, stronger. Don't break, don't break, stronger, stronger. Don't break, stronger, stronger. Gotta take it day by day. If you wanna get stronger, don't break, don't break, stronger.
I love that. She had to tell him to run because
He's
he's
the
never
ball.
hit the ball.
And
So-
so I was like, throw the bat down, go, because he didn't even know, like, oh God, what happens now, right? Because he's never gotten to that part. One thing I also love, so when Colby was working on his layups, like if you play basketball, like maybe you notice that like at first he just ran and stopped underneath, and then afterwards he runs around, turns around, looks for the rebound so it doesn't get hit in the head, and tries to get the rebound. Because if I get the ball during the session, they have to run. And so they all are like, if that ball is coming, you better get it because I'm not running during this. So I kind of do it a little like actual sports coachy, and it's great and fun, and it makes it go really good when I make kids run all day.
And I do a fine motor camp. I call it All Set for School, but it's mostly handwriting based. But we work on things like opening packages and getting your backpack on and stuff. And it's super fun. And my inner preschool teacher comes out and I theme it up and it's fantastic. But this is a pre and post. This is just from 3 weeks of intervention. So going, that's a drawing of self, which is great. Let's see. We've got some tools. I'm just going to click through this really quick. So if you have concerns for DCD, use the DCD queue. It's easy, it's awesome. If they have a positive, make a referral to OTPT for, rule out DCD or coordination issues or whatever you want to call it. We've started getting referrals like that. We celebrate. It's so great. I think I saved our first one because we never had that before. And just make sure that there's no exclusionary diagnoses. You might want to consider discussing it with the family, bringing it up. You can let us do it. It's fine, either one. Contact the physician or the team or whatever. And then we do have some informational materials on Centerlink. I don't know if that's available to them or not. Oh, there you go. There's a link there. But we've got a couple of knowing notes on DCD, one of the interventions. We've got like a physician rap card form, all of that's available there. But I think now it is time to hear from a parent who worked with Erin, and she can even give a better impression of how this has been for her. So.
Give us just a second while we switch everything over to get Miss Jen up here.
Any questions while they're setting up or while they're transitioning over? Are you all inspired and excited about DCD?
And wish they would go to PT because my camp looks more fun than Patty's.
It is so not. I have a different theme every week with costumes and themed snacks and crafts. It's amazing.
It's not a competition, lady.
Oh, Sally. Oh, Sally.
I'm teasing. This one.
It is funny, like for when we're doing our camp, Erin's like, supply wise, she's like, can we get a football this year? And I'm like, all right, week 1, day 1, I need snacks and decorations and.
Although mine's a little tricky because sometimes we're in a gym, and so I have multiple kids with coordination difficulties. Hi, Miss Jen.
Hello.
But then I have kids with bats and balls in a teeny tiny room, and I've got them coming from everywhere, and I'm like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it.
Reactions. All right, so Jen, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of give us some information about you and Ben?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, hello. My name is Jennifer Todd. I have a little boy named Ben. He is now 10 years old. And a bit of our backstory is probably for the last 5 or 6 years, up until he was right around 9, I'd been what I felt like was nagging our pediatrician. Up until really the point that I felt like I was going crazy, because something just didn't seem 100% right with Ben. He's the sweetest kid in the world, super clever, but I kind of describe him as being similar to that of like a newborn giraffe. He has like these arms and legs, and it just was like he did not know what to do with them and how to make them work. At 9 years old, he couldn't ride a bike. He couldn't walk down the stairs like one foot after the other. He liked to use all four, like his hands and feet, to go up the stairs and to come down the stairs. Aaron probably remembers, he like would raise his hands up in the air, like high in the air, and go 2 feet on each step. Couldn't do a push-up. Couldn't tie his shoes. We struggled with like things like brushing your teeth. And not that he couldn't do these things, just that he couldn't do them like his peers, like every other 9-year-old. And that was when we met Haley and Aaron and learned about DCD. I had been asking, it felt like at every physical, and really even anytime I could get in front of his pediatrician, to really like explain why Ben couldn't do physical things quite like the other kids in his age group. He was clumsy, pretty fearful. Like if we were at the playground, he would try to walk across bridges on play sets. He would crawl. He couldn't like figure out how to get across the bridge without crawling. So when we first brought these concerns up, yeah.
Jen, can I introduce or interrupt?
Yeah.
Do you want us to put your slides up
Oh,
here? Or do you want to
sure.
show that? Which
I
one's easier for
can
you?
try. Let's see if I can figure out how to share and you.
Because we need to see cute Ben's face. As much as I love seeing yours, we gotta
Let's
see him too.
see if I can share. Here we go. Let's see. Can you see this slideshow?
Yes, perfect. Yep.
Okay, let's
Thank
see.
you.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So that's Ben. Really, we went to the pediatrician and we asked like what was going on. And the first couple of times we got, Ben, he's super tall. He'd always been in like the 99th percentile for height. So like growing inches at a time from day one. So we got like, well, he's a super tall kid. He's just trying to figure out how to, use his legs and he'll outgrow it. The next time I really felt like I almost begged for a physical therapy referral. And at that point we were told he was swimming as well. We were told, he swims, he's really tall. He just needs to work on his range of motion. So we were given some stretches and kind of sent on our merry way. And I honestly, kind of like I said, I felt really crazy because none of this explained why his arms were just as clumsy as the rest of his body. And really, like I said, he was like a newborn giraffe. So I waited another year. At the next appointment, I asked, was it normal that around the 7-8 year mark, he couldn't ride a bike? But his 4-year-old sister could ride a bicycle. And I was told that it's not really considered a milestone, that he would learn to ride the bike when he wanted to, but the thing was he did want to. He tried so many times and we failed so many times. And so last February, he turned 9 and we took him for his yearly physical. And I asked again, like, how come we haven't outgrown this? And you know, you didn't promise, but you made me feel like it was going to be okay. So we got another referral to Children's, and that was when we met Haley. And I think it was probably within 5 to 10 minutes of our like intake appointment, like the very first appointment you go to, where she was like, "Have you ever heard of DCD? Because I'm pretty sure that's what we're dealing with." And it honestly has been like a light switch for us. And I cannot express how the last year has changed Ben's life. Having the answer of DCD and starting Ben with Aaron on his co-op journey has really been like the key to unlocking what he will say is probably the greatest year. He can do push-ups now. He's walking up and down the stairs just like everybody else. Aaron will tell you he's a swimmer. He was not able to dive off of the block, which the block is the platform that they dive off of. I mean, Aaron went to so many extremes to try to help us get him to a place where he could. We set up things at Children's for him to practice, and we're a year out, and now the kid is diving off of the block and competitively swimming. Like, you would have no idea that he had DCD. Now, the number of videos that I could show you where he was working through his plan, you know, would get you from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. But there were some days where I didn't think we were going to do it. And so these things, they can't be measured just by physical achievement for us. Ben has always been a super happy, really enthusiastic kiddo. But the older that he gets, the more he sees how his peers are, how the world works. And school was starting to become really difficult at that 9-year mark, right before we got his DCD diagnosis. And kind of like I said, co-oping has really changed that. And so for all of you in the room, I know I felt crazy. I have no idea. My pediatrician was so kind about it. And I'm sure Aaron, you know, can attest that I talked to her to death about it. But I don't think we would be here and have this diagnosis if I hadn't persisted and asked and questioned why he was the way he was, that it wasn't just he was clumsy. It was like this brilliant little kid who's testing off the charts academically, couldn't figure out how to tie his shoes and what was going on there. So from a parent to a clinician, you know, bear with us, because what does one more set of eyes or one more opinion hurt when for someone like Ben, it's really been the key to unlocking his abilities. And I think it's opened the door for kind of endless possibilities that we really thought were once lost to him. And for a mom, that's really immeasurable. I talked about this the last time I shared, but I'll never forget it. I remember we'd only been doing therapy for probably 6 or 8 weeks. And I remember leaving an appointment with Aaron and Ben, getting into the car and just turning to me and saying, "Mom, I think she really gets me." And that was really like our meetings with Aaron. I don't think either one of us will ever forget them. And we're not going to therapy every week now. And we don't get to see her face, but we've learned how to set him up for success and work through those challenging things. And I really think, you know, we have Aaron and Children's to thank for that. And this is a super exciting video. So the picture on the left is Ben struggling, bless his heart, to learn how to ride a bike. And then this video here, if it works, is him all on his own. So, you know, for me, for a parent, you know, this is what we're looking for, just this, letting our kids get those milestones, simple things like riding a bike and tying your shoes and just walking up the stairs that other parents and people take for granted. You know, for us, he works at it really hard, and we're so grateful for Aaron and the team at Children's.
I feel like I need to stop asking you to come do this because every time I'm like, oh, thanks. Because it's just really like, this is why I love DCD so much, is because these kids think that there's something wrong with them. And our parents often think that there's something wrong. And then it's like, it's just that their brains don't come up with the plan the same way that other people's do. And they just have to figure out the strategies to learn things differently.
Yeah.
And then they build so much self-confidence and awareness. And it really, like, this is one of those things where I can work on strengthening a kid for 4 years and maybe then they can do a push-up. We worked on using co-op to come up with strategies of how to actually do the push-up. And then you still have to build the strength, because if you're not strong enough to do it, you still need to work on it. But instead of working on strength over and over and over and over, they come up with the plan, the strategy, and then they're willing to try it because it's their own idea, their own plan, and they want to teach people how to do the thing that they learned how to do. And so I feel like Ben, I use Ben as an example all the time, because he is a very creative kid. His plans are not typical plans. So during co-op camp, when we were working on different things, he was like, oh, that's like a Koopa stomp or whatever. I don't even know, Nintendo stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. What does that look like? And he shows me and I'm like, cool, that's exactly what I want you to do. So that's part of your plan. So sometimes his plans were like these super elaborate things. He understood them every time. I still don't even know what the words are that he was using, but it doesn't matter because it's not my plan, it's his plan. And that's how he kind of learns and grows. So yeah, does anybody have any questions for us or for Jen? Anybody? Yeah, and I think microphones up here.
My question is for Jen. I was just wondering, like, one of the things they talked about was like some of the social implications of like not being able to fit in with your peers by not being able to do some of the like athletic skills, like, you know, like jumping rope or passing the ball and stuff like that. Is that something that Ben ever struggled with? Like, if so, how did you guys navigate that?
Yeah, it is and was. And Ben went through Aaron's amazing co-op camp. And I think, Aaron, you hit the nail on the head with this. Ben thought something was wrong with him. So it wasn't just that he had a hard time doing the thing, he also was embarrassed to do the thing. Now he knows that there's nothing wrong with him. He just needs to come about doing things maybe a little differently than his peers. And so now he's not afraid to try the things. He does it. He doesn't, it's not always graceful and it's not, but he does it. And that is something that I was fearful as we were creeping further and further into like fourth, you know, he was in the third grade into fourth grade. I was like, you know, he's gonna stop wanting to participate because he was really worried about what other people thought of him, especially with things like football and basketball. Those eye-hand coordinated activities, and going through therapy, going through the sports camp, he's like, oh, okay, there are other people like me. It's not a big deal if I'm not perfect at this. I'm going to try it and keep coming after it and keep coming after it. And I think if anything, these kiddos, they are the way they are, right? But if we can, as their parents or their clinicians, just ingrain in them, like, try. It's okay to try and fail and keep going. And that's what we do with Ben, which is really that like plan, do, check, act. Like we do that a lot with a lot of things. Like that did not work, my friend. That did not work. Let's try it again. And so now he's 10, he's in the fourth grade. And I see and have heard even at school where he really participates more, and he tries more and he's not so much worried because he knows, like, I just don't think the same way as everybody else, but that's okay.
And one of the big things that you kind of emphasize there with the goal, plan, do, check is it's the plan that's not working. So we're coming up with a plan. The kids are coming up with a plan with some of our guidance. They're coming up with a plan. And if it doesn't work, it's not, hey, you failed again, or once again, you did it wrong. It's, hey, that plan didn't work. How can we change the plan? So it totally puts it in a different perspective of where is the problem even coming from? Because if you do the wrong plan over and over, it's going to fail. And a lot of times at the beginning of our sessions, when we're talking about co-op, we'll do something silly, like, okay, I want you to teach me how to put my coat on. And so they're usually like, whatever, Miss Erin, like, okay, that's dumb. Well, you're gonna put your arm in the hole, okay? And I'll be like, okay. Like, not like that, like, put it in the hole. And I'm like, I did put it in the hole. Give me more to the plan. Put it on the inside of the hole. Okay. Not like that. You have to put it where your arm goes. This is where my arm goes. So then we kind of make it silly for them to see, like, you have to have a plan that works. And if you're not doing the correct plan every time, it's not going to work. Okay. And if you get to come up with your super cute way talking about Nintendo when we're actually outside shooting basketballs, great. Now you're bringing in an interest that you have, an understanding that you have, and teaching me something that I clearly still don't know anything about. And be able to bring it into something that's more of a difficult, challenging activity for you. I love co-op. I love these kids.
I'm one of the therapists that has benefited from learning about co-op from Patty and Erin. And one of the things Jennifer said, and I think Erin sort of echoed, is this idea that this intervention teaches a method that they can apply to other things. And so you are giving them skills and tools that go well beyond the therapy walls, right? And that's the coolest thing about it, is that it's not something that just stops with dribbling a basketball, right? And so that's been really fun for me as a therapist to learn and to see the kids and families use.
Yeah. And I think Julie up here kind of mentioned something earlier of like, but then you have to teach the parents not to get involved, right? And to back off a little bit and to give them time to process and think. And that is a huge piece of it. Is as a therapist, I don't want you to fail, but as a parent, I really don't want you to fail again, right? I've already seen how challenging this is for you. We know it's tricky. That's why we're here. And so sometimes it's that like, hey, let's give them a minute to process. Let's let them think. Let's let them figure it out. Where Jen was amazing with this. She was like, oh, all right, Ben's going to figure this out. Let's do it. And let's see how this works. And so it takes everybody to be able to get the results that we want to see quickly. But the cool thing with co-op is even if families don't have the time, energy, or effort to practice during the week, our kids make improvements. If we're working on bike riding and it is snowing outside, I'm not expecting that you're going to go home and practice bike riding at all whatsoever. I would love if you talk about your plan, like, hey, how do you start with your bike? Put your hands on, you put your foot on the pedal and push. Cool, just talk about it. If you don't have time to talk about it, great. Next time you come in, the kid's already going to remember because it's their plan and they came up with it and they problem solved rather than somebody telling them the exact steps to do. So it's just really nice to be able to give the kids the opportunity to be the leader. And a lot of times at first our kids are like, I don't know, if we ask questions. And by the end, like, especially in co-op camp, I'll say something and the boys like start to race each other to see who's going to come up with the right answer first. It doesn't have to be a right answer. It just has to be an answer that could be going in the plan, right? So at first our kids are a little quiet and a little hesitant. And by the end, they're like, hey, what's up? How's it going? You know, so that's also a really cool thing to see.
There is a question
yeah.
in the chat, about Erin specifically, but I know Patty does this as well. How do you all use video in your intervention with co-op?
So much.
All the time. So sometimes if it's something that has like a very direct start and end, or you can kind of break something in pieces. We're working on a jumping jack, which I'm only working on jumping jacks if kids want to know how to do a jumping jack, not to improve coordination. But if they want to be able to do a jumping jack, we're going to start and I can, kind of give a visual. If it's something like bike riding or skipping down the hallway or running, that's going to be a really challenging thing for me to freeze in the moment for a kid to be able to see what they need to modify and do. So we use videos all the time. We saw Ben practicing his dive into our pool, which was our crash pad. And so we took videos all the time and then he would go and watch them and then he would critique what he was doing. I can't tell you how many videos of Ben I have where Ben starts the video and he gets really close and he goes, all right, this is my attempt at diving into the pool. And then he like walks up and does it. Because then it's really fun for him too, right? Because he's kind of being this little podcaster, like, what are those people called? Influencer. So we don't know, we're old, we don't know what they're called. But so then he has the opportunity of using the video too. And then they get to stop and process and think, see, and be like, oh, you're right, my head is looking up the whole time. Because, you know, when you're diving in the pool, if your head's up like this, that's not going to be a very comfy, cozy way of entering the pool. So then it just kind of gives them the opportunity to stop and see and make changes to their plans as well.
And also kids with DCD, people with DCD, don't know what their bodies are doing. Like you, if you're like, you know, hit it with power or whatever, I'll be like, I am. Or, you know, like put your feet at an angle. They're at an angle. So like, I don't exactly know, like, I think I'm doing what you're doing. So video is really important that way. Another thing that really helps, like if I'm, you know, I'm not going to just say, what's your plan? Invent the way to do this. I'm going to still show you how to do things, but I want you to put your concept on it. So a lot of times I'll take a video of me doing shoe tying or whatever, or something, bouncing a ball, and then take a video of the kid trying. And I'm just going to start with what's different. What's the first thing that's different? Because I got it successful, you didn't. So just them, you know, a lot of it's very guided to get them to the plan. It's not just like, here, invent a way to do it, you know, and a video is a really handy tool.
Yeah. Video is also nice. YouTube is really nice so that we can watch the experts doing the thing that they're experts at. I had a kid who wanted to learn how to skateboard. I'm not skateboarding for you, not going to happen. So we were able to pull up a YouTube video, turn the sound off because we don't want any of the experts' ideas of how it should be done getting into their heads.
Captions off. all
Yep.
that off.
So we want them to just look at the pure movement of what's happening and they put a plan to it. Oh, it looks like he's standing on it sideways. Perfect. Oh, it looks like he pushes with his right foot. Cool. So we're coming up with a plan that way instead of me having to learn how to do the thing to teach them how to do it.
In our class, we have this one video where, just an example of like this guy teaching this dance, and like we have you guys make a plan, but then like we turn on what he says, and he's like, you put your left out and a half running man to the reverse, and we're like, what is he talking about? But that gets in, you get stuck in your head. So I'm thinking of like running man 90s dance. I don't know, but it was nothing like what this guy was doing. So it is really valuable to turn off the expert's way of teaching you.
Which is often us and the parents,
Mhm.
right? We are the experts, we think, so we have to turn ourselves off a lot.
And I want to just add in from a parent's perspective, Erin knows this, I have a perfectionist kiddo. So Ben would get his feelings hurt when he couldn't do the thing, especially repetitively. He would get really frustrated with himself. So having a video was easier to be like, what do you think? How do you think it went? What do you see? Versus being like, you didn't do it, or you didn't do it the way that we said you should do it. That really, and we still do it now. Like there are things he's trying to get a qualifying breaststroke for championships. And he's struggling because it's a lot of, you have to put your toes a certain way and then move your arms and your legs at a separate time. And you can, you know, so we still to this day, I do a lot of videoing him. And then I'm like, what do you think? How do you think this went? And he'll be like, oh, okay, I see. I didn't do this piece right. And so it for us has been something that I've carried with us, because then we're not caught so much up on the, you didn't do it right, or you're doing this wrong, or you could do this better, but just, how do you think it went? What did you see? What are your so that has really helped Ben, especially because he's a little perfectionist. So.
And that's really common, I will say, like you have these uncoordinated perfectionists. I think they're afraid to try something unless they can do it exactly right, because they're so used to failing, right? So it's common to hear that they're a perfectionist.
Yeah. Microphone. I think this one works better. Just sounds.
Thanks.
I was just gonna say, going along with that idea, I know that there, you had talked earlier in the presentation about how kids with DCD may because of the difficulties from the DCD may later in life be predisposed to things like anxiety, but I'm also wondering if there's a little bit of chicken and egg there, like if there's do you find that kids with DCD are more likely to be kids who are described as having like an anxious temperament, or like being a little bit more shy or withdrawn and that sort of thing, and sort of like how that plays in.
Yeah. I don't necessarily know when it comes to the chicken or the egg, which one it is, because normally when we're seeing them, it's the one where the motor skill is impacting their lives enough that they're coming to see us for motor skill difficulty. But as we're trying the new things, that's when we're like, oh, by the way, they also tend to cry a lot if they're having to do new things. They don't want to do it in front of people. They might kind of bow out when you're doing stuff in the session. And so a lot of times with us, it's, yeah, you do have anxiety because you don't know how to plan for the unexpected. And the unexpected happens all the time, especially when you're learning a new skill. And so I feel like sometimes, especially with bike riding, I try to get a lot of the education out of the way ahead of time of, hey, when you're on a bike, if you're going really slowly, the bike's going to be wobbly, right? So we might want to go a little faster, right? So we're going to have them kind of be like, okay, yeah, we got to go faster. If you're learning a new skill, you don't think you should start fast. So, but that's something that we have to teach them. A lot of times our kids go in and they put both feet up on the pedals at once because they're used to riding a bike with training wheels. Can't do that on a two-wheeled bike, you're going to fall over. But those are the things I'm not going to let them experience as a fail for our kids who are more anxious. We're going to talk about it ahead of time. So our plan is going to negate some of those things that are going to be more tricky and more challenging.
I also use co-op to, okay, if you're feeling scared, what do you, like, we can use it to treat that anxiety. What do you do if you're feeling scared? What helps you, so you can use co-op to kind of help them come up with a plan for what makes them feel better, safer, et cetera. Okay.
Well, not just specific to this,
No.
that that's the evidences, it's also cerebral palsy, and there's other diagnoses.
Autism, brain injury, Parkinson's, like it's just a super handy
Concussions. We're gonna
therapy.
have
Yeah, concussion. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, co-op is not just for DCD. My oldest is 5, and so I have a very athletic husband. So now it's funny as the 5-year-old is learning these, skills, and she's playing volleyball, and they just went to practice on Monday, and he's like, oh, she's just putting her arm way up and hitting it really hard, and it's going all over the place. So I was trying to teach her, it's like a pendulum. I'm like, sweet, she's 5. What is a pendulum? And so, it's just one of those things where he's like, and then, I started thinking about co-op. And so I was like, okay, ask her a question. What does this look like to you? And she's like out there practicing. And I'm like, not the time, Dad. Like, let's try it at home. So he was like, I think we're going to have to, have you help us out with this one. Like,
Yeah,
thanks, Boo. But it's just really funny that like as a coach or as an athlete or as a parent where you know how to do the thing, it's so easy, right? Just do the thing I'm telling you to
put
do.
Power in it. Just
And that's
use your
just-
pendulum.
It's not how it works. So they need to come up with their plan. But I was like, oh, he knows about co-op and he knows that he should just wait for me.
I've got all these videos of like my husband trying to teach my kids things in a very ineffective, normal way. And now I'm like, oh, it's your turn. Like examples of that.
Yep. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you, Jen, for coming and sharing Ben with us again.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's always so nice to see you.
Do you guys have any announcements or anything on our end or? All right.
Thanks, guys.
Don't go
Thanks,
anywhere.
guys.
The team one today.